This amazing knowledge base is available to you and workshops throughout the world. Hello and welcome back to the VauxWizard channel. Now in the 2 months or so since I restarted my VauxWizard used car buying and selling business, I've had to deal with some car problems I'd never experienced in the previous 2 decades of doing the job. For example, a leaking gearbox on an Audi A3 and rattly front suspension on an Up GTI. Now whilst these are annoying, they're actually quite easy to diagnose. However, with this otherwise perfect 2020 Seat Ibiza that I bought from a subscriber, I'm having to deal with the worst kind of job you can get on a car, and that is to try and fix an intermittent fault. Now, if you're lucky, a diagnostic tool like VCDS or Carly will give you a clue, but if you've got an intermittent fault and no fault code stored, then you really are on your own. I was at the verge of just throwing expensive parts at this car, hoping one of them would fix a problem. However, I was saved by a €7 download that took me exactly to the cause of the problem. And this amazing knowledge base is available to you and workshops throughout the world. And I'll explain how you can access it later in this video. But first, let me explain how I ended up buying a Seat Ibiza with a fault I didn't think I could fix. Before we get started, let me just remind you guys how you can support the channel. As ever, the easiest way is simply to subscribe. Big thanks to each and every one of the current subscribers. Your support is really appreciated. But if you like what you see on this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, then please do so. Because I'm back buying and selling cars, there'll be lots of unique content on this channel you won't get anywhere else over the next few months. Okay, so why did I buy this Seat Ibiza with this fault? Well, I didn't know about the fault until I'd paid for the car. And it was, on the face of it, the perfect 5-year-old used car. So just 2 owners from new. Last owner bought it from Seat 2 years ago, serviced every year by Seat. In fact, it had not long been serviced and MOT'd by Seat. Because I bought it from a subscriber, I was able to have a very long test drive and it drove perfectly. It's completely immaculate. The owner was so fastidious that he actually replaced the original Bridgestone tyres because they were cracking and fitted a brand new set, not because they were worn out. So the test drive was absolutely spot on. I was super happy to pay for the car. And once I'd done that, I got back in the car about 10 minutes after I'd last been in it and pressed the start button. It's got a keyless entry, by the way, but that makes no difference to this problem because when you turn the key on a non-keyless car, you're effectively operating a switch, then you can just release the key and it will start. It kept on churning. Well, there we have it. That is the problem. And yeah, you wouldn't be very happy if you just bought this car and it did that, say when you put some petrol in it on your way home. Now this comes as a shock in a modern car because modern cars do not churn the starter motors and not start. I haven't had that for a very, very long time. So instinctively I pressed it again to stop it and then pressed it again to start it, and it started just fine, and it drove for the hour back here from Gloucestershire to Warwickshire with 0 issues. I wasn't worried because I felt once I got home I could scan it, look for fault codes, and something would guide me in the right direction. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. This is an example of where there's no fault stored being actually a very bad thing, because what would I have to go on? There are many complicated components that all have to work together for a modern car to start. I had nothing to go on. What I had noticed though was that when it was churning the starter motor, there didn't seem to be a smell of petrol, so it wasn't pumping fuel into the engine, and also that was confirmed by the fact that when you press the starter button the second time to start it, it would always start crisply. If it had been chucking fuel in, there would have at least been a splutter while it cleared its throat. But having said that, was that actually really useful? Because could it be the fuel pump control module? Could it be the electronic control module? I think we've gone into well into the thousands of pounds just replacing those parts, and even then there'd be no guarantee of a solution. Now I have had problems before where batteries have been on the way out They might start the car most of the time, but sometimes maybe the voltage is depleted by the starting process and it won't energise the fuel pump and the car won't start. It's quite a small battery on this car. It's got quite a lot of spec and it is 5 years old. It's never really done a long journey, so it didn't seem to be too much of a risk to go and change the battery for another one. They're only £70. Unfortunately, that did not do the trick. I always like to have a browse of the internet to see if other people have suffered a problem that I'm encountering, because generally, you know, they sell so many of these cars, or this engine particularly, there's bound to be some other case, but actually there wasn't an awful lot, and those that had complained about the problem hadn't actually posted a solution. So all I could try and do was try and understand what the car uses to start the engine. To do that, I needed to access a database called Erwin. This dedicated online portal gives users access to all the information required to tackle even the most challenging of repairs. And there are separate sites for the 4 main VW Group brands: Volkswagen, Audi, Seat, Skoda. Think of it like your dream Haynes manual. I've mentioned Erwin on the channel before because companies can use it to check and update the same digital service history database that main dealers use. So there's no excuse for an independent garage not doing this, especially as it's completely free of charge. Now, accessing the repair and maintenance info isn't free, but as I will show you, it's money well spent, and there are various subscriptions to choose from. I usually just go for the 1 hour for €7, which allows you to print or save as much information as you can get your hands on in that time. Think of it like a digital supermarket sweep, just without Dale Winton. Now, after downloading numerous wiring diagrams and other pages and still feeling daunted by the task in hand, I noticed a link entitled Technical Service Bulletins. Now, it's easy to miss this, but the reason it's at the top is because you probably should look here first when you have a fault, because when cars go into main dealers and faults are reported, they get fed back to the factory, and it's in the factory's interest to produce a Technical Service Bulletin, also known as TSB, to provide information on repairs and prevent incorrect diagnosis and unnecessary replacements of parts, which, if the car's still under warranty, the factory would be expected to pay for. Now, to my surprise, there was a TSB that 100% exactly described the symptoms I was having with the Ibiza. It said the car cranks intermittently for over 10 seconds and won't start, but it always starts correctly on the second attempt. And the best bit was it suggested a relatively inexpensive and straightforward solution, and that was replacement of the 2 engine camshaft position sensors. Okay, let's now have a look at the tools and parts required. The good news is it's a very straightforward job and well within the capabilities of the home mechanic. You don't need an awful lot of tools to do it either. The ones you do need are a T30 socket. I'm using it on an extension with a ratchet. You need hose clamp pliers, or water pump pliers, or mole grips will do the job, but these are highly recommended. I'm using a torque wrench, but as long as you're gentle, you don't need that as well. Onto the parts then. Well, these are so important, these cam position sensors, that I wouldn't compromise on quality. And actually, looking on the web, you can pay more for a Febby Bilstein part than for a Bosch part, which I'm pretty sure is going to be the same as original. And these are £17 each. Now, chances are only one of them is faulty, but because they're so cheap, it makes no sense to only do the one. So we're going to replace both. Okay, let's get cracking and replace the cam position sensors on the very naughty Seat Ibiza. Now, I haven't downloaded the instructions on how to remove the airbox, but it's pretty straightforward and looks actually just like the Up GTI, which I've done many times to replace the air filters on those. We're going to try and do this in real time because I don't think it will take too long. It's probably quicker if you're a professional mechanic as well. So let's start off then with the T30 holding the airbox on. Just be careful not to drop this because I'm pretty sure getting it back will take longer than doing the whole job. Let's pull this hose off here, and now we need the hose clamp pliers, which are in my pocket. So first hose is on the front. And then there's one at the back as well. And that should then, make sure you pop that hose off as well. There's nothing else holding the airbox on now, so get your hand under the front of it, and there you go. So now you can see the camshaft position sensors, one there and one there. So inlet and exhaust. Now this exhaust one's obscured by this breather hose, so we're going to pop that off. Again, T30. I haven't got the torque setting for this, but it's probably the same as the ones for the position sensors, which is 8 Newton meters. I won't take it off all the way because it's attached to the turbo or something down there, so we'll just move that as we need to get to the bolt for the rearmost sensor, the exhaust one. So let's do the hardest one first. We'll just pop the plugs off. So we've got a security clip that needs pulling back, like so, and then you can use that to undo the clip, which is much nicer than some of the other ones that are really hard to undo. There we go, so that's both undone. Onto the exhaust sensor, just pop the breather hose out of the way. And that wasn't very tight at all, guys. So if you haven't got a torque wrench, 8 Newton meters really isn't a lot of torque. Okay, again, try not to drop the bolt, especially down the air hose. All right, that should just pull out now. There you go, that's the old one. That's the new one, so slightly different coloured O-ring. We'll just put a bit of oil on the new O-ring, like so. Just make sure it seats correctly, which that one has. On to the next one then. So this is the inlet, and by the way, it's the shorter screws or bolts that hold the sensors on, the longer ones for the breather. And again, let's just lubricate that seal and get it into position. Yeah, happy with that. A little bit of resistance, but not a lot. Okay, bolts back in then. Don't cross thread these, so start off gently by hand. Yeah, happy with that. Might as well go for the torque wrench now, which is set to 8 Newton meters. There we go. Bingo. Don't forget to plug them back in, otherwise you will have a very unhappy Ibiza, not just intermittently. And then put the breather hose connection back in position. I'm going to go 8 Newton meters on this, which is just a guess, but it's exactly the same fitting as the sensors. There we go. Okay, airbox back on then. Start off at the back. And make sure it's sat correctly into this air hose, because it's really easy to not have it in properly. So pull it up before you locate it. Okay, that's onto the rubber bungs. It's hold it onto the rocker cover. Hose on, and then big air hose at the front. Actually, let's do that one. Just to check everything's secure, but yeah, we haven't done an awful lot, so there's not much you can forget. Don't forget the T30 at the front, which I nearly did forget. Okay, don't have the torque setting for that, but I reckon it's 10 Newton meters. Okay, so that took about 8 minutes in total. I reckon you'll be able to do it a lot quicker if you're not filming. The official instructions say that once you've fitted the new camshaft position sensors, you need to adapt them using a diagnostic tool, but it doesn't actually tell you how to do that. I use VCDS, you could probably use Kali as well. If you go into engine module, then adaptation, you will see there are 2 camshaft position sensors that you can adapt, and just click on the new code they're suggesting, press do it, and that will do the job. Whether it's absolutely essential, I'm not sure. But anyway, let's find out if the car starts. Obviously, one swallow doesn't make a summer. It's going to take a few drives for me to make sure this car's completely fixed, but if it does start, at least we know we haven't made it worse. So let's press that enticingly glowing start button on this Ibiza center console. Okay, that's good, but I'm going to run it for a few more days just to make sure it's fixed, and I will report back to you shortly. Well, it's been a few days since I did the work, and I'm pleased to report it appears to have done the trick. It's interesting reflecting on this problem, because even with over 2 decades of working on Volkswagen Group vehicles, I think I'd have been pretty stumped without the information that I got from Erwin. I'd like to think a good professional garage will use Erwin as a matter of course to diagnose tricky problems, but come to think of it, most garages will charge you for work that doesn't even fix the problem, so they have no incentive to be that efficient. In fact, you could say being that good would be bad for their business. I do appreciate sometimes there is no choice but to chuck parts at a fault and hope one of them does the job, but if your garage does that without checking Erwin first, then you probably ought to find another garage, or you can get on Erwin yourself, do some research on your own car, and if there's any relevant information the garage might find useful, then pass it on to them. Just to prove a point, I'll pull over now, put it into park, turn it off. I have no nerves. There we are, started crisply. As ever guys, thanks for watching this Volkswagen video. Keep subscribing, keep commenting, and I'll see you for the next one very soon.